So hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar, which is clothing and apparel testing. So something a little bit different today, looking at basically sort of testing things for the fashion industry, but looking mainly how we test those kinds of products and the reasons we might test them for as well. So today's webinar is being recorded and there's also going to be the opportunity for question and answer at the end. So if you have any questions as we go through, please do feel free to make note of them in the questions and answers option on the screen as well. So the agenda today, we'll be looking at an overview of the apparel industry. So why would we want to test in the apparel industry? What is that looking like in terms of the global landscape? Looking at the global regulations for advertising in general. So basically, if we're saying anything about our product, what are the rules and regulations surrounding what we're allowed to say, and you know what evidence we need to back it up as well. We'll be looking at successful marketing claims as well that are already out there, and then looking at how we substantiate those. So we're looking at consumer research in particular, and I'll be sharing a case study to give you an idea of how we choose the appropriate study design to be able to back up our research as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Regulatory Director at Ayton Global Research. So I'm really focused on advertising regulation in particular and anything to do with claims. So as I mentioned, looking at how we substantiate those, making sure that we're providing the best research possible for our clients so that they can go ahead and confidently use their advertising claims in their marketing, again, in their key markets. So yeah, looking at what your key markets are and making sure the evidence is appropriate for them. So yeah, if you're ever looking at a new project in research or looking at some advertising claims, you can always feel free to reach out to me and I'll be able to help you find the best methodology possible. So what does the apparel market look like? As I mentioned, we'll have a bit of an overview so we know why we want to make these kinds of products and why is it really important that we do have some claims and some marketing to back up what we're saying and to stand out against our competition. So the United States, China and Japan are the largest markets. So it gives you a really good idea of what this industry is looking like in terms of a global landscape. Women's wear is the best-selling apparel category in the world, which is, as you can see, worth almost triple the amount of menswear. So it really is still a very female-driven, like target consumer. And again, like I said, that's where we really look at our competitors in terms of what women are looking at and buying as well. The sports apparel market is a really important one and it's got a huge consumer base as well. I think especially in the world where athleisure is like your normal kind of comfort clothes, especially lockdown, sport clothing has become not just about sports, it's about fashion, it's about comfort, and it's something that's become really popular to wear inside, outside, wherever. It's also where you see a lot of marketing claims. So again, we'll touch on that a bit later, because obviously sports clothing needs to be made in a way that will keep you cool, be comfortable, and so there's a lot of testing alongside that as well. Online shopping is obviously huge in terms of where people are actually purchasing their apparel. So it's making the manufacturing grow as well. So countries like India have got huge e-commerce portals. So again, looking where that geography is, this is really where we're seeing everything kind of grow. So I think that's the case. Online shopping has been a huge growth kind of for buying anything, but in particular clothing. I know, especially because of the pandemic, even though clothing stores have opened back up, I know me personally, I'd rather shop online because it's not really worth the risk necessarily to go clothes shopping. And you've got many more options as well when you're online. So COVID-19 as well. So as I've mentioned, it has been a huge impact on all industries, including fashion. So what is the impact directly as well for the apparel market? So obviously it had a massive restraint on the manufacturing market. So there were supply chains were disrupted. There's also a real decline in consumption. So as I mentioned, especially, you know, over here in most countries, clothes stores had to shut down. You weren't allowed to go clothes shopping. So even though the online went up, it did, however, obviously have a decrease in the market. So people couldn't really keep up with the supply chain, but also there was less shopping kind of going on generally. Of course, it will recover from it. And as it's been mentioned by Goldstein Market Research, it's a black swan event. So it's not related to anything to do with economy. It really is just to do with the pandemic itself. So the apparel market will recover from this as well. So looking at what our market's like then, so we kind of get an idea of what the competition's like, where the market's based. So now I really want to think about how do we get products out there and what can we say about them and what's the regulation behind that as well. So generally advertising regulation is of course applicable to every single industry in the world, because if you're making an advert about your product, it falls under advertising regulation. So most of the world regulates adverts with self-regulation. So obviously it's a way for the industry to regulate itself, to be really straightforward. But what does that mean? It basically means that most countries don't have a government body that is that's actually kind of policing adverts. They have organizations that work alongside the government, such as the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, that regulates, puts out the regulations for people to follow, and regulates the adverts that are there as well. So each advertising authority puts out a code, and then it's up to you as the marketer, you know, anyone who's part of that industry, as I put here, the advertisers who are paying for the advertising agency is responsible for its form and its content, and the media that carry it. If you're any of those three parts, you should know what the advertising code is and follow by those rules. Basically make sure that we've got a fair playing field. It's legal, decent, honest, and truthful. We're not being offensive. We're also not misleading consumers, and we're not being unfair to our competition by following these rules. If you're seen to be breaking these rules, it doesn't tend to be policed as such as a kind of an industry. There are investigations that go on, but most of the time it's really done on a complaints basis. So whether a consumer was to purchase your pair of trainers, for example, and you've got, I don't know, a claim on there that says it's got cooling technology to keep feet dry, and they've got them and thought, actually, my feet have never sweated more than this, then they might complain about your advert. And it's the same with your competition. You might have a certain technology you've used in your clothing and they don't believe what you're saying about it. They could think, well, we've got similar technologies and it doesn't do that. So they're exaggerating. They might complain about your advert as well. And then obviously it's up to the advertising standards to investigate it. It could mean that you have things like, well, your adverts will be removed from whatever media you've got it on. But obviously if your claims are on the actual clothing itself, you might have to do a whole product recall. So it could become very expensive. If you kind of ignore those complaints as well, when you ignore the ASA or whatever advertising authority it is, trading standards can be involved, and that's when you could find yourself getting very hefty fines. So it's really important that you're following the code of conduct and not trying to get away with sort of saying adverts that aren't substantiated. Some helpful resources in terms of, you know, who is looking at these adverts, how do I know what the advertising authority is? You've got the International Chamber of Commerce. They have a self-regulatory framework that countries can adopt, and they do adopt. There's about 52 countries in the world, kind of major markets that are using that framework. You can have a look at their website and see who is actually using that framework. So it's a really good starting point. There's also the International Council of Advertising Self-Regulation, or ICAS, and they also have they're an international council basically. So lots of different advertising authorities come together. And yeah, they kind of have this shared kind of platform where it says who all the members are, and then you can have a look at them and see any news they're releasing as well about advertising standards. So really helpful resource. So when we're actually thinking about our advertising claims then, and this is again really applicable to any market, any industry, including clothing and apparel, we want to think about how do you find a relevant claim about your product. So instead of just kind of going, right, we'll put it out there and we'll kind of make up what our claims are, you need to think about how you can get a relevant claim about your product that will help it stand out. So explore your target group and understand what their needs are. So again, if we're looking at sort of sport clothing, we go, okay, we know this is for people that are really active. What do they need? What do they want? How can you find that out? You can conduct some research, you can do some market research and find out what kind of claims you want to say about their product, what do they think about them, also get their feedback on what they want to see in that kind of product. And that's really helpful as well. You can ask your customers directly if you've got a mailing list as well. You can look at product experiences that already exist out there. And you can also look at your competition. What are they saying about their products? Because again, you can use the same claims as long as you have them substantiated and you have the kind of evidence behind it. Check your competitors anyway and see what their successes and failures are. I think places like the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority, their website's really helpful because they have their cases published on there, and you can see what kind of similar claims have been put out there, and what's been kind of upheld as a case, what's not been upheld, and what kind of evidence wasn't accepted or was accepted by the ASA. So looking at failures is just as important as looking at the successes of your competition as well. You should always be thinking of it as product performance and consumer need. What can your product achieve, and what do the consumers actually want? And that's how you can really find a relevant claim. Of course, creating an effective claim is a multifunctional task. So we've got to think about everything together and make sure we're always relating it back to what we're trying to say about our product. So what are the insights? What's in it for the consumer? Why should they purchase your product above anyone else's? But what can your product actually deliver? Don't kind of go and say, okay, well, the consumer really wants this, we're going to say that about the product, if you know that you haven't got the technology behind it. What does the brand strategy look like? What do you look like as a brand? What's your story? What is your image? And what is your strategy? Who are you trying to approach? And does it fit within that as well? Obviously, it needs to be implemented. So we need to think about the actual whole supply chain and making sure we're not just kind of going out there and saying these claims without having the kind of gusto behind it to be able to achieve it. And of course, when you think about whether it's validated and whether you can validate the claim, if you can't prove it, then you can't say it. So we need to make sure we can always have some legally supported validation behind it. And a strong claim will take all of that into mind. It's always really important when we go down to the research phase. I say to all my clients, always think about from the beginning, what are your research objectives and what does that look like? Because the whole research needs to go back to it. It's really easy to go off piste and go, oh, what if we ask that? What if we do this? What if we try and claim that? Well, think about this all the time. What does this always look like, this will? Because you don't want to start going down a kind of road and then finding you've just got misled, and you haven't found the right claims that you need for your product. So substantiation, as we mentioned, it needs to be legally validated. So what does the substantiation look like? Well, a great way to substantiate your claims is consumer studies. So looking at what the consumer's perception is of the product. As I mentioned, you might have technology to say it can keep your feet cool, these trainers, but what do the consumers actually sense themselves, and can they validate those claims? It could be the same for best fitting jeans, extra comfortable, all of these kinds of claims. We need to make sure that our consumers can perceive it. Otherwise, as we mentioned, they are going to be the ones that complain about your product, because if they can't notice these claims, they can't see this technology that you've put all of your investment into, you're not going to get very far. So we usually conduct in-home consumer studies, where obviously the products are tested at home by the consumers. This reflects the actual use. So again, instead of kind of having a few people in a lab test out a product, that's not really what's going to happen in the real world. They're going to purchase your product, they're going to take it home, and they're going to put it into their day-to-day life. So that's really what we want to achieve for our consumer studies. They can also compare products, and again, that's quite common with clothing and apparel, because we want to say, you know, what's the best option of all of our suppliers? What do the consumers like the most? So it could be a good comparison as well. Of course, you might need some additional evidence. So if you're looking at measurements, it could be something like, I don't know, 25% more cool than the leading brand or something like that, looking at that technology. Obviously, there's going to have to be some kind of scientific data for looking at a measurement. So that's where we really can come into some help, because if you come to us and say what your claims are you want to make, we can either reword them to fit in within the consumer research world and making sure we can get them substantiated through consumers, or we can look at that other kind of evidence you might need. So as well as looking at our claims, obviously that's really important. But as I said, especially when you're looking at something like clothing and apparel, you might not be testing it for claims. You might just want to get feedback on your product. So anything with the new product development, finding out, does this technology work? Does this supplier work? Do we want to choose a supplier and test them against each other? So as we say, like benchmark testing is great. That could be against competitors. It could be against your own products, but you can find out where you sit within the competition. You can also get brand perceptions as well. Does the clothing suit our brand? Is our brand appealing to our target consumer? That's all really, really important. You might want to investigate a new market as well. You might be really successful in your home territory, but now you want to launch your product somewhere else. And does it actually get accepted by those consumers? It's really important for us to get. So also as well, testimonials and reviews. So do people like the product and what do they say about it? You can use those testimonials in your marketing, and you can use those reviews as well. And it also gives you a chance to get any negative feedback. So obviously we can ask all these questions, but people might not have a chance to have their say. So we really want to be able to get as much as we can from their feedback to help the product development as well. Photos and videos, you might want a video of people going for a run in their new sport gear and saying how great it is. That can already help support, especially social media marketing. We get a lot of video requests for social media marketing. And then feedback on the packaging itself, might be labeling that you've got there, and the price points. Do people think it's worth what you're going to sell it for? This is all really, really helpful feedback that can be gathered in one study. You know, this doesn't have to be many studies. The kind of claims you might see as well, 88% of people agree that the fabric is hyper soft. 9 out of 10 people would buy and recommend this product. 96% of people agree the fabric is lightweight and breathable. These are all really nice claims that could really support your campaign. So in terms of that, what kind of claims are out there at the moment? So we've got things about these gym leggings. What kind of claims are they saying about them? There's slick and low friction support. There's sweat wicking, 4-way stretch, breathable, feels cool to the touch, stretch and shape retention, support you in every way you sweat. And then this is where you see these kinds of claims to see how a proprietary fabric, Luke Stream, is knit to create a low friction surface that feels cool to the touch while you run, train, or hit the mat. So this you can all get through those consumer studies and see if people agree with these kinds of claims. We've also got these trainers. And again, they're all about being really, really cooling and easy to wear. We've also got claims there about the supply chain. So recycled yarn. Again, that's not going to be your consumer claim, but that you can get through your supply chain. But really, it's talking about the ventilation system, bursting air circulation inside the shoe, immense breathability delivered by the patent. And all of these kinds of things, and also saying it's really comfortable, a cushioning effect, really comfortable walking throughout the day. These are all things that consumers can prove as well. Then we've got things like jeans. So it features an innovative tummy slimming panel. So do people feel like it contours their curves but slims their tummy? That's really what we'll be looking at with this. So basically, do people agree with that fit as well? So I want to talk about a case study in particular, because I think it really helps to put these things into context. I found a really interesting case study that I thought would be, well, just of interest, basically. And it's an anti-cellulite regime cream and a control pants. So this is actually products that are used in conjunction with each other. We have the cosmetic cream that's going to be used on the legs and everything like that. And then we've got the control pants, which are used in conjunction with it to see the best effects possible of the cream. So we wanted to assess the efficacy of the product and substantiate the anti-cellulite creams for the cream that's used, anti-cellulite claims for a cream that's used in conjunction with the control pants. They also wanted to look at premium shoppers because the brand was looking to retail in Harvey Nichols and Harrods. So that's really important. So what's our panel criteria for the study? We wanted all female because that's who they're marketing the product towards. They have to be between 25 and 45 years old as well, because again, that's their target market. That's exactly what we're looking for as well with consumer research. We want to completely mimic who the target consumer is. They had to have visible cellulite on their legs, buttocks, and stomach. They don't want to currently use anti-cellulite products. We want to look at this as like a fresh effect. And again, we wanted to get those high-end shoppers, so we broke that down in terms of who the key markets are. So the test conditions, so they had to apply the cream twice a day for 28 days and wear the pants after applying the cream for 8 days. We had an instructional video, which I'm going to share with you as well, to show how they're going to use the product. So let me just share my other screen. Oh, sorry. This happens every time. It's always an interesting one. Here we go. So I can show you the instructional video here, and you can see what kind of instructions we gave.
Hi, my name is Carys. I'm going to show you how to apply your anti-cellulite cream and panties. Squeeze a small amount of anti-cellulite cream into the palm of one hand. About the size of a small walnut should be enough. Now massage the cream into your skin in small circular motions, always directing your movements towards the heart until the cream is fully absorbed. Try to do it just how our model is showing you. Cover your main problem area thoroughly. It may be the thighs, buttocks, tummy, or arms. You have been supplied with enough anti-cellulite cream for one area for 28 days. Now step into the correct size panties that you have been supplied with. Smooth the panties so that there are no creases. Wear the panties throughout the day. Your panties can be hand washed up to 12 times with lukewarm water. Repeat every day for 28 days. Remember to go to www.clicksresearch.com to complete your questionnaire as directed.
Okay, let's come back to the presentation. So as you can see, it basically means we've got really good control on the study because we know they're going to use the cream and the pants exactly how they've been told to in the video. So that's a really good way of making sure that everyone's got the right instructions. And also we had to make sure there's any safety precautions in that as well, which obviously just are applicable to the regulations. So what were the results after we conducted the study? So we obviously had a whole massive questionnaire and a report that showed what the results were like. Then at the end of the report, we get a summary table to say for the questions, who agreed with the answer, who disagreed with the answer. And for the purpose of today, I've just selected 3 questions from that questionnaire. So as you can see, we've got the questions on the left, then we've got the number of people that were satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied, and then the percentage of people satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied. In this case, you can see we've had exactly 100 responses, so the percentage and the number are exactly the same. But we had things like the anti-cellulite system left my skin feeling smoother, 79% agree, 70% agree that the cellulite system improved the look of their cellulite, and 75%, I'm supposed to say 75% agreed that the skin left, the system left their skin feeling noticeably firmer. So we've got some really great results that they can use for their advertising. In terms of the legislation behind that, so where are we looking for the Advertising Standards Authority, where they're looking to market in the UK, they said that any sensorial claims which are based on opinion should be substantiated with consumer research data, which is obviously what this is. This is all opinions, so does it feel better, does it look better? That's really important to have substantiated through the consumer research. So in a kind of summary of today as well then, so it's essential to use advertising claims to stand out against your competition. Obviously, when we're looking at fast fashion and things like that, this isn't really what we're looking at. We're looking at really out there like new innovations within the apparel market and substantiating them to really sell our products. A well-designed study and questionnaire is really important for that valuable data. There's no point doing a study if you're not going to have really well-designed study in there, because as I said, it can go off-piste and you'll completely lose your message that you're trying to give to your consumer. You can compare against your competitors to benchmark. You need to make sure the data is compliant in the country you're selling. Always present your evidence clearly in advertising to avoid scrutiny. So I say exactly how many volunteers it was, how long the study was for. Just be really, really clear about what that evidence is, and always use recent evidence as well. We don't want to use really old evidence because things can change. Formulations change over time. Suppliers change over time. I want to make sure it's nice and recent. So I don't know if we've got any questions today before we kind of close up. I haven't seen any coming in, but obviously it's quite a broad category, clothing and apparel, but I hope that's given you some idea today about how that can be tested. I can't see any questions coming in, but as always, I'll be sending out the recording, so feel free to send any questions over to me on my email if you have any. Just to finish up, some things about the SCS. We've got the distance learning course, which is an industry recognized course in the essentials of cosmetic science. And you can look at their website there to look at some more information for it. We're also sponsoring the IFSCC Congress in London, September 2022. So please do register your interest there so you can come along to that huge event. There is my contact information, and as I mentioned, I'll be following up shortly with the recording. Thank you so much for watching today, and have a lovely weekend.